What year were you born, or did you move to OB?
I was born in Old Orchard Beach in 1941, shortly after shortly before World War II started, when Pearl Harbor was bombed. Yeah, I was born in November of that year.
Do you have any siblings? If so, do they live in town?
I've been married for 52 years, going on 53. I have a daughter, Amanda, who was born and raised in Old Orchard Beach. She now lives in Michigan. And I have a son that took over Radley's market from me years ago, and he's now living in North Carolina after we sold the business. So I have a daughter and a son and a wife, and 6 grandchildren. Nobody lives in Old Orchard any longer. Nobody in the family. I live in Scarborough, Maine, but I'm trustee of the library and treasurer of the library in Old Orchard. So giving back to the community.
Where did you live in town?
I lived originally on 93 Portland Avenue, and that was a house that was in the back of Portland Avenue, and is now Lewis Avenue, and that's where I was born and raised, right close to the old kite track and the old racetrack that was back in that area of town, right behind where Radley's Market is today, or Landry's Shopping Site.
Did you go to a lot of the races at kite track?
Yes, I did. I used to crawl underneath the grandstand after the races and look for coins and stuff. And I played and grew up right close to the kite track. It was one of my favorite places. And I used to play on the racetrack, and we used to get down to Little River and catch a lot of fish and bring them home, and my mother would cook them. And it was walking distance from where I lived. It was right close to Walnut Street, right back of Walnut Street. I ended up owning a house right on Portland Avenue, right abutting the kite track land, yeah, where I raised my children.
What was your childhood like in OOB? What was your childhood like in OOB? You already answered this a little bit. But...
What was it like growing up?
Yeah.
Well, my father owned Radley's Market. We were on the main street. It was Radley's nationwide way back in those days. And I spent a lot of time on the beach. I spent a lot of time working in the store, sorting bottles back in those days when bottles were worth a lot of money, and playing and going to the amusement park and riding the Ferris wheel, doing the donkey ride and the whale's mouth, and it was quite a nice place to play, and even in the wintertime we'd play down there when there was nobody around, and it was fun. That was a great part of Old Orchard Beach, was growing up in, that when it was a lot quieter than it is today. We rode our bikes back in those days with no helmets and all the gear that they wear today. So, and that was fun.
Beach school system?
I went to the Old Orchard Beach school system until my sophomore year, and then I moved out to California. But I started school at Old Orchard Beach. My first school was on School Street, which was grades 1 through kindergarten through 3rd grade, I think, or something like that. And one of my favorite things back in those days was I was a crossing guard, and we had a badge that the police gave us, and we had a bandana that we wore, and we were kind of in charge of crossing at the town hall. That's where I crossed, because I lived right near there, and right in front of where the town hall is, there was a sidewalk, and that's where the kids crossed to go to school in the morning, and you felt pretty prestigious and proud, because you got to tell the kids when they could cross and things like that. So it was being a crossing guard. You got a badge and everything. It was fun. It was hard to be a lifeguard back when I was one, because Sorry, are you taping?
It's fine. Are there any stories about the history of Old Orchard Beach that you experienced that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I was 7 years old, and we had a big fire in Orchard Beach, and a lot of people don't know about it, but my neighbor was Reggie Lewis, who was a plumber. His son was 3 years old, and when the fire started, he put us in the back of his pickup truck. We drove down to the end of Walnut Street, drove onto the beach, and drove down the beach and under the pier, and we watched the wooden roller coaster burn to the ground. It was quite a spectacular fire, and a lot of people don't know about it. That was 1948. That was a roller coaster fire, and it was treated with a lot of chemicals back in those, creosote, I think, in the wood and stuff, so it went up very fast. And it was a big fire. And then I was a junior fireman when I was in school, which we would go and help firemen fight fires. And then when I got older, I was a volunteer fireman. So I fought a lot of big fires here in Old. I fought the Ferris wheel when it burnt down, and the Whale's Mouth, and that whole side of the street and part of the pier burned. But that was, there's not many people that, today that can say that they saw the fire of 1948, and I was there. So it was quite spectacular for a 7-year-old boy to see a big fire like that, especially sitting in the back of a pickup truck on the beach.
Yeah. What are some things in OOB that drastically changed throughout your lifetime here? And have you been affected by any way?
Nothing that's really affected me. I've seen the population grow quite substantially. I've seen a lot of development, a lot of houses built in different places. I've seen probably the biggest change is the traffic now that we have compared to when I was growing up, and the amount of tent and trailer parks there are. There was only 1 or 2 when I was a young kid, and they became real popular all of a sudden, and became real big camp areas for people on the East Coast. And a lot of Canadians come here because it's the closest beach to Quebec City and Montreal. It's saltwater ocean for them to go swimming in. They come here and they think the water's warm. We think it's cold. And I think that Orchard Beach has really become a real family resort community, and it's nice to see the changes that are here in the town since I've grown up. Probably could think of a lot of other things if I,
You've already said one, but have you been a witness of any other catastrophic events in OOB, and has it affected you in any way?
Well, when I was a junior fireman, we had a fire, I think it was on Union Avenue or Atlantic Avenue, and it was probably the worst fire I'd ever been to as being a volunteer fireman. 5 children died in the fire, and it was quite a catastrophe. It was sad back then. That was probably in the middle 50s, I think, when that happened, and that was pretty catastrophic for me being that age. Nothing more than the big fires we've had in town over the years.
What made you want to stay in OOB as an adult?
I love the community. I love the state of Maine, and I'm a maniac. And you know the difference between a Mainer and a maniac. A maniac is somebody who was born and raised in Maine. A Mainer is somebody that wishes they were born and raised in Maine. So you can remember that. That's something I've remembered all my life, because I learned it when I was your age. So that's something you can put in your piggy bank and talk about later in life.
Do in OOB? Do you have a favorite thing to do now in OOB too?
I think my favorite thing to do is go swimming, and I went to California when I was a sophomore in high school, and I spent few years out there, but I'm still considered a graduate from Watchet High School, so I still go to their functions and things like that. And I learned to surf in California, and I brought the first surfboards back to the state of Maine, and I loved to surf. That was the thing, and my son followed in my footsteps. He was a big surfer, and when I lifeguarded, I, had a surfboard after I got done lifeguarding. I'd spend a lot of time surfing and spend a lot of time in the water, and fishing and hunting. Little River was a real attractive place to go fishing, and back in those days, we got a lot of white perch, and I'd go down after school, and I'd bring the white perch home. My mother would cook them for us, and there was a place down there, and when the track flooded in the springtime, that I could go out and walk in the water up to my knees when it was warm enough, and I could spear German carp, which were big fish, and they got into Little River by accident, and I would bring them down the end of Walnut Street to the Jewish neighborhood, and I'd yell "carp for sale," and I'd pull them down there in my little red wagon, and it was interesting to get down there and make 50 cents and come home with a pocket full of candy. So it was fun. Growing up as a child in the lodge was my favorite experience. I really enjoyed it, and had a lot of fun and a lot of good friends, and enjoyed sports and played Little League. I was a Cub Scout, Boy Scout, and back in the days when that was more popular than it is today.
What was your favorite place to hang out in OOB? Why, and why? Is it still there?
I thought, growing up, one of my favorite places was to go to the movies that were in the top of the town hall. And there was a movie, they would on the weekends have movies for children. And we'd go up there and watch a lot of cowboy movies, a lot of old movies, and Gene Autry movies, and a lot of different movies. And that was a fun thing to do on the weekends, was to go to the town hall. And then the church across the street from the town hall, the Catholic Church, St. Margaret's, they had dance lessons. So when I got to be in the 8th grade or so, we would go there for dance lessons in the evening, and it was a lot of fun. And that's where I learned to dance. And back then it wasn't all just rock and roll. It was, you had to learn to waltz and cha-cha and stuff like that. So it was fun growing up. So we look forward to the nights that we would have dance lessons. Mm-hmm. So you could pick out your favorite girl and try to dance with her. If you were fast enough to, all the boys sat on one side of the room and all the girls on the other side of the room, and they'd say, "Pick a partner," and everybody would run to the same girl. So it's kind of fun.
Were there any big landmarks that people may not know about today that you may like to share?
I liked Cascade Falls as a kid growing up. I played up there a lot, and there's a bear cage that was way back in the woods there, and that was a fun place to play and after school, and to go up there with a bunch of guys and climb around the falls and go through the woods up there and follow this, look at the waterfalls and things like that. Was a nice landmark. There was an old cemetery on Portland Avenue that I used to go and visit, and just look at the tombstones and see how old it was and how many years ago people were buried there. And that's the biggest landmarks, I think. And there was an old the old ice houses, especially up on the road, Adelaide Road, I think, that goes up behind Saco Benefit Savings, went to a pond up there where there was an ice house. And way back when I was a kid growing up, we didn't have refrigerators. The ice man used to come into our house and put a nice block of ice in our refrigerator. And the refrigerator was on in the back room of the house, and he just would walk right in and put a fresh block of ice in to keep your food cold and stuff like that. And so that was kind of different. And, yeah. So those are some of the landmarks and some of the places that I like to hang out.
When you were growing up?
Actually, I never did see the pier when my father and mother met on the end of the pier at a dance. And that's how they met. My mother was from Westbrook, Maine. My father worked here in Owacha Beach for a grocery store. And they met at a dance on the end of the pier. And that's how they ended up getting married. And back in the 30s, late 30s. I think they were married in 1937. And so that was an interesting place, into the pier. Then I watched one big storm after that was destroyed. The pier, the end of the pier was destroyed once, and then another storm came in and destroyed pretty much a lot of the pier, and they rebuilt it. It's a lot shorter now than it used to be. It used to go way out in the ocean. It's quite a bit shorter today. But I always swam around the pier when I was a lifeguard. In the mornings, that's how we used to train, swim around the pier, and before we'd go on duty. And it was some pretty cold water. Some pretty, yeah. So I know a lot about the pier.
Anything else you'd like to share?
Think on that a little bit. I think that one of the things that growing up as a kid really helped me a lot was being a member of the the library, and I can remember going to the library and you didn't even dare to sneeze because the lady that was running the library was very, very strict back in those days. But we had a lot of fun. Enjoyed going to the library. I think kids today should spend more time in the library. It's a learning experience. So I think from all the years that I was in business in the town, and since I moved out of town, I want to give something back to a community that I was born and raised in and love so much. So I'm a treasurer of the library, trustee of the library, and I will continue doing that. I enjoy it and have a lot of fun there. It's a nice library. It's really got a lot bigger than when I was a kid. I think the town of Owacha Beach is a real nice town now compared to what it used to be back in the 60s when we had a lot of motorcycle problems with gang problems. Not gangs, so much gang problems, but in the summer it was rowdy, and now it's more of a family-oriented town. So it's a great place for people to vacation, and it's a great place to be born and raised in. And the school system here is nice, and I enjoy it.
You miss being a kid?
That's a tough question. Do I miss being a kid? Well, some ways I do, and some ways I don't. I'd like to be a kid today, just to know what I know and know like everybody my age. I think that if you ask them the same thing, they'd say, "I'd like to be a kid today and know what I know today, growing up." But I've had a good life, especially with all the friends I made here in Owacha Beach and running a business here, and all the times I've had, good times I've had here in Owacha Beach. I wouldn't really change. I'd keep it the way it is.
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Think on that a little bit. I think that one of the things that, growing up as a kid really helped me a lot was being a member of the the library. And I can remember going to the library and you didn't even dare to sneeze because the lady that was running the library was very, very strict back in those days. But we had a lot of fun, enjoyed going to the library. I think kids today should spend more time in the library. It's a learning experience. So I think from all the years that I was in business in the town, and since I moved out of town, I want to give something back to a community that I was born and raised in and love so much. So I'm a treasurer of the library, trustee of the library, and I will continue doing that. I enjoy it and have a lot of fun there. It's a nice library. It's really got a lot bigger than when I was a kid. I think the town of Orchard Beach is a real nice town now compared to what it used to be back in the 60s when we had a lot of motorcycle problems with gang problems. Not gangs, so much gang problems, but in the summer it was rowdy, and now it's more of a family-oriented town. So it's a great place for people to vacation, and it's a great place to be born and raised in. And the school system here is nice, and I enjoy it.
It says here, did you ever go to any of the concerts at the Ballpark or Pier?
I went to one or two concerts, and I can't really remember who they performed. I wasn't really into music. My wife was, and that's the reason I went to the concerts. But I did go to a lot of the main guides baseball games at the ballpark. And I was a season ticket holder at the main guides way back when. And I met a lot of the ball players. As a matter of fact, a couple of them that became major league players, lived in my little house behind where I lived on Portland Avenue, and I rented it to them in the summer, and enjoyed going to a lot of the games. And I was chairman of the town planning board of the town at the time when we approved the ballpark. And it's too bad it didn't last, but it was a good AA ballpark.
Famous people that have come to visit OOB?
Growing up on Portland Avenue, a lot of the people that performed on the Pier used to stay at my house, so there was quite a few. There was a house not on Portland Avenue that who let the Negroes stay there at their house back in the days when there was a lot of trying to think of the word, racism, and they couldn't stay in the same hotels as white people did, and they stayed at the Emerson House, I think it was, on Portland Avenue. And when they were full, we had some of them, my mother would rent rooms to some of them at our house on Portland Avenue. And that was, I remember as a boy meeting some of them. Real famous people, just can't think of any right offhand that